Hello again. Many older people who remembers the beginning of the post-war immigration boom, if I can describe it as such. I remember vividly the horror with which many people in Britain greeted the arrival of black people in their street, or perhaps those from Pakistan. I think it fair to say that very few people regarded this as a welcome development. Those were the days when people still felt able to say things such as, "There goes the neighbourhood." Even then, though, there were progressive and left-wing folk, usually young, who would make it their business to welcome the newcomers and show them that not everybody in the area was a dyed-in-the-wool racist or racialist, as it was then known. Such folk were, though, a tiny minority. Most householders would far rather that the street remained completely white. They feared that if one or two families moved in, then before you knew it, it would become a West Indian or Pakistani neighbourhood. I'm talking now, sort of 1950s and 1960s. This is why those renting rooms would put up signs saying, "Sorry, no colours." Of course, much has changed in Britain since those days, and we are supposed to believe that human nature too has changed, and that people today have a more enlightened and progressive outlook. That is certainly possible, of course, but it's equally possible that the general view remains precisely the same, except that folk these days are aware that they cannot voice their misgivings out loud in the way that once they could. I am bound to say that I don't think that attitudes have changed all that much. I'm not talking now about what we should or should not feel, nor yet about abstract ideas such as right and wrong or good and evil. I'm speaking about how things actually are, as opposed to how they sometimes seem to be, or how they perhaps should be. The difference, if you like, between appearance and essential nature. In other words, I'm asking viewers to consider the following scenario and ask themselves which description they think best corresponds with the likely reality. Imagine, if you will, a small town or village which is populated entirely by white people of long British ancestry. Now imagine that gradually properties are acquired there which are converted into houses of multiple occupation, and that these are filled with foreigners from Africa and Asia. So, houses which were once lived in by white British families now contain seven or eight Arabs, Nigerians, Afghans, or what have you. What do viewers suppose that the attitude of those living in this village will really be? Do they think that most people will be indifferent to the development? Or do they rather think that it is a change which will actively be welcomed by those living there? Or do they rather believe that most people will be horrified and wish that this was not happening in their neighbourhood? Forget what you think might be a virtuous reaction. I'm asking what people think would be the actual feeling among those faced with this situation. This is not, of course, a hypothetical scenario. It's one being played out in every corner of the kingdom now. You see, you can certainly train people to conceal their emotions and hide their feelings. There is no problem at all in making it socially unacceptable to wrinkle up one's nose at the prospect of West Indians moving in next door, or to avoid rolling one's eyes at the prospect of the local pub being converted into a mosque. But that's quite a different matter from getting people to think and feel differently. My own suspicion is that there are very few in this country who have in their hearts actually welcomed the effects of mass immigration in Britain. I think that we have all been trained not to object to anything of the kind now, in case we are seen as racist, but I don't think that the essential nature of British people has changed a whit. Nor do I think that this is only a question of a few old fossils who still cling on to such ideas, while everybody else welcomes millions of random foreigners moving into their country with open arms and unbounded joy and enthusiasm.